That's the ideological point there earlier.
This is a new thing, though, right? I mean, relatively speaking, this hard-nosed stance from the left of the equality of outcome and the only reason why there wouldn't be 50% women or 50% black or 50% any, you just pick any marginalized group. The only reason why it wouldn't be even across the board with all other races is because of discrimination. This is a fairly new stance.
Well, I mean, there were moments that were fairly well publicized that I don't forget when Larry Summers got fired from Harvard. So Larry Summers was the president of Harvard, and he's a famous economist, and he gave a speech for which he was fired. There might be a little more color as to why he was fired. I mean, he was more fired because he once the wheels started to come off, he had alienated enough people that he didn't have friends to kind of prop him up. But the thing that pulled the wheels off was that he gave a speech and he said, "We know there are differences in the bell curves that describe mathematical aptitude between men and women, and this explains why there are many more top-flight male mathematicians and engineers than women. And it's not that the means of the bell curves are different. So the means could be the same, but there could be more variance so that the tails are thicker in the case of the male bell curve. So at the absolute ends, both the low end and the high end, you have many more people. So, if you're going to ask, what's in the same size population, how many people do you have at the 99.999 percentile of aptitude in math, say? It could be that you have, and there's a fair amount of data to show this, many more men at the tails than women, right? And that's true for grandmasters in chess, right? It's just this is not a and it may be true for something like playing pool. I mean, there are just differences and that may not be entirely environmental. Almost certainly are not entirely environmental.
That is one.
Right.
It's a big issue in the world of pool. Men and women play separately, and there's no reason physically why they shouldn't.
Yeah, it's not a strength game.
Right,
yeah.
but women are allowed to play in men's tournaments, but they never win.
Right.
Jean Belucas was a woman who's she was like one of the only women to ever compete and beat men. She's like an extreme outlier, and this was like, I want to say it was in the late 70s or the 80s. And other than that, there's been a few women that have done well in tournaments, but when they come to major league professional pool tournaments, they're almost always won by men. When I say almost, I mean like 99.9%.
So there was a Commonwealth Games have been happening, it was just over the last couple of weeks, and there was a male to female transgendered athlete in the weightlifting category.
Yeah, that's a whole nother ball of
who
worms.
participated in the women's competition.
Yes.
And the Commonwealth Games, at the time of her joining, hadn't yet put down a rule as to testosterone levels in the females competing. And so this male to female transgendered person qualified in the female games and was, as you'd expect, winning in all of the games and was the front runner and destined to win the competition as a male to female transgendered person. And the only reason, and it would have led to a huge crisis in the Commonwealth Games because there was some resistance to this notion. And of course, the questions that arise, is this fair? Men are born naturally with higher levels of testosterone, for example. The only reason it didn't lead to crunch time, and that was the huge scandal of her winning, is that she injured herself in the competition, and by sheer accident.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, I can expand on that a little bit because I've actually gone through this extensively. Because there was a woman who was used to be a man, was competing in mixed martial arts against women and just beating the shit out of them. And I was saying that this is a mistake, and that you're looking at whether someone should be legally able to identify as a woman, portray themselves as a woman. Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have the freedom to become a woman, in quotes, in our society? Yes, but you can't deny biological nature, and there's physiological advantages to the male frame. It's specifically when it comes to combat sports. That's my wheelhouse. I'm an expert. I understand there's a giant difference between the amount of power that a man and a woman can generate. And if you're telling me that a guy living 30 years of his life as a man, that's essentially like a woman being on steroids for 30 years, then getting off and then having regular women being forced to compete with her and trying to pretend this is a level playing field. It is not. There's a difference in the shape of the hips, the size of the shoulder, the density of the bones, the size of the fists. That's a giant factor in your ability to generate power. Is the size of your fists.
It's also an ethical problem. I mean, it's not just competition here. So you have girls getting beaten up by someone who used to be a man.
Yes, but people came down on me harder than anything that I've ever stood up for in my life. Never in my life did I think there was going to be a situation where I said, hey, I don't think a guy should be able to get his penis removed and beat the shit out of women. And then people are like, you're out of line. But that's literally what happened.
The summary of the situation.
That's literally what happened. This is a conversation that I had with a woman online. This is one during this whole thing. She said this person who had turned into a woman has always been a woman. And I said, but she was a man for 30 years. She goes, no, she's always been a woman. I go, even when she had sex with a woman and fathered a kid? And she says, yes, even then. I go, well, we're done because you're just talking nonsense.
Yeah, that's ideology. That's ideology covering the facts as they are. Is that she had a male physique.
This person who's arguing with me wants to claim this moral high ground of being the most progressive, and they're always looking to step on top of anybody who's less progressive than them and complain and proclaim superiority. And this is the ideological sport. This is the idea sport that you see with when people are playing just ping pong with ideas. They're not listening. Yeah. You need to listen to experts especially when you're talking about martial arts. Yeah. The difference is so profound and the results are so critical because you're talking about a sport where the objective goal, the goal is clear. It's very clear. Beat the fuck out of the other person in front of you. Yeah. So anything that would give you an advantage in beating the fuck out of that person should be really looked at very carefully and not thrown through the lens of this progressive ideological filter that we're going through right now, because that's what it is. I mean, that's how people are looking at it. And it's with weightlifting as well. When transgendered athletes going to weightlifting competitions, the male to female transgender athletes are overwhelmingly dominant. I mean, is this a coincidence? Or it's someone who had fucking testosterone pumping through their system and a Y chromosome their whole life. And now all of a sudden we're supposed to say, no, she's a woman, she's dainty. She's got size 14 feet. She's got gorilla hands. Like, what in the fuck are we doing here?
So I think, as you said earlier, she is a woman, but for the purposes of competition against other women, legally she's a woman at that stage if she goes through that identity transition. But I think we have to recognize, and I think even many traditional feminists are making this point, much to the anger of the trans community. They're saying, hold on, what you're doing in this way is actually, we fought so hard and so long for these female spaces where we have a space of our own. And now people that used to be men are coming into those spaces and actually quite literally beating the crap out of us in those spaces.
Yes.
Whether it's in boxing, whether it's in weightlifting, in martial arts, they are, by definition, they're dominating all of this. Of course they are, for the reasons you've said.
And the experts that they're calling upon are almost all transition doctors, surgeons, or people that have transitioned themselves. When they speak to actual board-certified endocrinologists, and some of them only do it off record, but one of them, I forget her name. She was in one of the big mixed martial arts publications, Ramona Krutzek, I believe is her name. She's saying, like, no, not only does it actually, doing this transition, like from male to female, you're putting estrogen into the system. So the bone density change that would ordinarily take place if you remove someone's testicles and stop the production of testosterone, estrogen preserves bone density. So you're actually retaining the male bone density. There's so many problems with this. And then one of the other things they say, the Olympics allow it. The Olympics are very ideologically based. There's not a whole lot of science to this transition thing of allowing male to female athletes to compete in the Olympics. And there's an extreme amount of corruption in the Olympics as it is, with the IOC being in bed with WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, and the way they handle this Russian scandal. I mean, this Russian scandal that was highlighted in that fantastic documentary, Icarus.
Yeah, that was good.
Fucking crazy. The Olympics are not to be trusted. That is a gigantic, multi-billion-dollar business where the athletes get paid zero money. It is inherently corrupt from the top down. No doubt about it. So to call upon them is to see who should be competing as a woman. Fuck off. They're not the experts. This is not something that's been examined. And this is coming from someone who, one of my jobs is examining and commentating on fights. That is a big part of what I do. I understand fights. And I know what it looks like when a man's beating the shit out of a woman. Yeah. And that's what it looked like when this person was fighting women. There was a massive physical advantage, massive, and not a skill advantage.
What was you mentioned something about the reaction that you got to that. What was the trouble you got into?
Oh, people were so mad at me. I mean, it was just so many. Not only that, they took my words out of context. They quoted all these different gender transition doctors at saying that there's no science behind this and the science behind it being totally fair and totally equal. It's just not, and people know it. Everyone knows it.
They couldn't put Chris Cyborg against this guy and give him a run for his money? The wrong weight class? Or?
That's the other way. That's the other thing. And we're dealing with a similar situation like that in Texas. I don't know if you know about the girl she was born a girl. She's transitioning to a boy in high school, taking testosterone. But in Texas, they only allow her to compete as a girl. So she's dominated the Texas State Wrestling Championship 2 years in a row. Wow. And it's horrific because she's on steroids. She's on testosterone.
And they usually test for this kind of stuff.
Doesn't matter because they're testing chromosomal.
Yeah,
she's a woman. She was born a woman, right? She's born a girl. So because the fact that she's transitioning to be a boy, they don't give a shit. You're a woman, you're not going to wrestle against men. You're a girl, you're not going to wrestle against boys. So they've allowed her under extreme protest. I mean, it's terrible. She wants to compete, or he, I should say, wants to compete as a boy. Yeah. They won't let him. They say, no, you were born a girl, you have to compete as a girl. So when he competes, everybody boos. It's awful. It's fucking awful. I mean, it's really devastating.
So that question for you, that way around, if it's female to male transition, somebody that used to be a woman that transitions to a man and wants to compete with the men, they don't have an advantage.
They
do
don't.
They?
No,
if
they
they're
don't
allowed to compete,
they're at a
with
disadvantage.
So if they win in that context, they've actually done really good.
Yes,
right.
And it's possible. Look, women can beat men.
Yeah,
I mean, it happens all the time in jiu-jitsu. There's especially in jiu-jitsu in particular because it's such a technique-based art. But it is possible. There's also a woman named Jermaine Durandamy who's a world-class mixed martial artist who's multiple-time world Muay Thai champion who fought a man and knocked him out. It's a crazy video. She fought a real man, KO'd him with a straight right. It is possible for them to win if their skill level is so far superior that it overcomes the inherent strength advantages. But a woman to male transition would be at a severe disadvantage against a natural male.
So would you be in that Texas case? They clearly have it wrong. They should allow him to compete with the men. And would you be? Whereas I think all three of us probably instinctively would resist the notion that a male to female athlete competes with other females because they'd have an advantage.
I would resist that, yes.
But would you be for a female to male athlete competing with men?
Yes, because I don't think there's an advantage. There's no advantage. But here's the problem.
And the consent is sort of running in the other direction there. She is continually putting herself, or he is putting himself in harm's way knowingly.
And I'm not opposed to a woman fighting a man if she so chooses. Like I'm not opposed to bull riding. If you want to, I'm not lobbying to get bull riding outlawed. But if you want to be so fucking stupid that you climb on top of a 2,000-pound angry animal, go for it. You should be able to do whatever you want. I think you should be able to jump out of fairly good airplanes. If you want to parachute, you should be able to risk your life parachuting. The difference lies in just massive advantages. There's a massive advantage in transitioning from male to female. Female to male, here's the other problem. Female to male, you have to take testosterone. You can't legally take testosterone and compete. It's been a giant issue in mixed martial arts because for the longest time there was a loophole, and the loophole was testosterone therapy, and they were allowing testosterone replacement therapy for male athletes that were either older or it was a symptom of having pituitary gland damage, which comes from head trauma, which means really essentially your career should be over. Your body's not producing hormones correctly. And that's a very common issue with people that have been in war, people that have been blown up by IEDs, people that have been hit a lot, even soccer players a lot of times show diminished levels of testosterone and growth hormone because of pituitary gland damage. So you wouldn't even allow that. So a female to male would be in a whole nother problem in combat sports because it's not legal for you to take testosterone and compete.